There is an island at the bottom of the world where, not long ago, a government deliberately rained poison across every acre of ground it could reach. And the gamble was so large that the people who signed off on it could not promise it would work or say for certain what it would leave behind. It is called Macquarie Island, a thin green splinter of land about 1,500 kilometers south of Tasmania, stranded roughly halfway between Australia and Antarctica, so far from anything that most Australians will live their whole lives without seeing it. It is barely 12,800 hectares of tussock grass, mud, and rock, a place so rare it carries World Heritage status. And yet, over a span of winters, crews there loaded somewhere around 250 tons of poisoned bait into buckets, hung those buckets beneath helicopters, and flew careful grid lines back and forth across the whole island until almost every square meter of it had been dusted. They were trying to wipe out rabbits, rats, and mice. All three species, all at once, down to the final breeding pair, on one isolated landmass. Nothing that ambitious had ever been finished anywhere on Earth. But here is the part that never makes the postcard. The reason they felt forced into something this extreme was not that wild nature had run amok on its own. It was that an earlier rescue, a careful and well-intentioned act of conservation, had already turned this island into a slow-motion disaster. Most people hear the words poisoned an entire ecosystem and picture careless men who did not grasp what they were doing. That is not what happened here. What happened is far stranger and more unsettling, because the catastrophe on Macquarie was assembled, one good decision at a time, by people who were trying to save it. Read that again, because it is the spine of the whole story. To see how it got there, you have to rewind almost 2 centuries, to the early 1800s, when ski-lasing ships began stopping at this freezing dot in the Southern Ocean. The men who came to strip the beaches of seals and penguins for oil brought passengers with them, some on purpose, some by accident. Cats arrived around 1820. Rabbits followed roughly 60 years later, in 1878, released so shipwrecked sailors might have something to hunt and eat. Rats and mice simply walked off the boats. And on an island that had spent thousands of years with no land mammals at all, where ground-nesting seabirds had never needed to fear a predator creeping through the grass, every one of those animals was a loaded weapon. This was a place that hosted enormous colonies of penguins and seabirds, generations of them that had evolved with no instinct to hide their eggs or guard their burrows, and the newcomers found a feast with no defenses. Now follow what happened next, because this is where good intentions start bending the story. By the second half of the 20th century, the rabbits had multiplied into the tens of thousands and were chewing the island's fragile plant cover down to the dirt. So in the late 1970s, managers released a disease, the myxoma virus, to knock the rabbit numbers down. And it worked. Rabbit populations crashed. The vegetation began to climb back. For a while, it looked like a clean win. But killing the rabbits carried a hidden consequence almost nobody was watching for. The cats on the island had been living largely on those rabbits. And with their main food supply collapsing, the cats turned to the next easiest meal, the seabirds, and began hammering the very burrowing petrels the island was supposed to protect. So a second rescue began. From the mid-1980s onward, crews set out to remove the cats entirely, hunting them year after year. And in the year 2000, the last cat on Macquarie Island was killed. On its own terms, that mission succeeded. The petrels it was meant to protect were spared from the cats. And if the story ended there, it would be a clean conservation triumph. It does not end there, because here is the first break, the moment that should not have been possible. Removing the cats did not heal the island, it detonated it. With the cats gone, and with the rabbit-killing virus slowly losing its grip as the rabbits built resistance, and with the plant life recovered just enough to feed them again, the rabbit population did not merely bounce back. It exploded. By the mid-2000s, scientists estimated well over 100,000 rabbits were swarming across the island, and they ate it alive. Researchers later reported that as much as 40% of the island's vegetation had been stripped or badly degraded. And on a steep subantarctic island, bare ground is not just ugly, it is dangerous, because the roots that once held the hillsides together were gone. In 2006, a landslide on a slope that scientists say was made worse by all that rabbit grazing and burrowing tore down toward the coast and wiped out part of a king penguin colony at a place called Lusitania Bay. Picture that. A rescue meant to save seabirds had, through a chain nobody fully steered, ended with hillsides collapsing onto penguins. One of the scientists studying it, the Australian ecologist Dana Bergstrom, and her colleagues warned in 2009 that the island was sliding toward what they called an ecosystem meltdown. Decades of conservation effort being undone right in front of them. Read that plainly. The island was not dying because humans had ignored it. It was dying because of the way humans had tried to help. And that is the trap the whole poisoning campaign was born out of. So in 2007, the Tasmanian and federal governments committed to something audacious. Rather than pick off one pest at a time and risk yet another backfire, they would try to erase all three remaining invaders, the rabbits and the rats and the mice, in one coordinated assault. The budget ran to around $25 million. The plan was, by the gentle standards of conservation, almost violent in its totality. And if you find these forgotten, strange corners of how the world actually works as fascinating as I do, stick around, because the way they pulled it off is the wildest part of all. The weapon of choice was a poison called brodifacoum, an anticoagulant, baked into small cereal pellets at a tiny concentration, about 0.002%, roughly 20 parts per million. Spread across the whole island, the actual amount of active toxin came out to only a few kilograms, yet it was more than enough, if an animal ate the bait, to be lethal. The strategy came in layers. First, in 2011, they released a second rabbit disease, a calicivirus, to slash the rabbit population before the baiting even began, which reportedly cut rabbit numbers by something like 80 to 90%. And, just as importantly, meant far fewer poisoned carcasses left lying on the ground for scavengers to find. Then came the helicopters and the buckets and the grid lines, dusting the entire island with bait. And then, last, came the dogs. But it did not go cleanly. Here is the second break, the part the people running it had braced for and still found painful. When the first limited round of baiting went out over a slice of the island in 2010, the poison did not only kill the targets. It killed native birds too, the ones that scavenge, that feed on the dead and the dying. Around 960 non-target birds across 6 species were found dead after that early baiting. Some had eaten the bait directly. Others were poisoned by eating poisoned rabbits, a second-hand death rippling up the food chain. Among the hardest hit were northern giant petrels and the island's native brown skuas, scavengers that fed on the carcasses. The toll was alarming enough that the Australian and Tasmanian governments paused and reviewed the entire operation. And this is the brutal arithmetic at the center of the whole gamble. To save the island, they had to be willing to kill some of the very wildlife they were trying to protect, betting that the survivors and the generations to come would inherit a place worth living in. Officials said openly that it was a price they expected to pay. Weather punished them too. Fierce subantarctic storms, grounding the helicopters and pushing the main effort to the following year. When baiting resumed in 2011 and finished by that July, the teams had layered in every mitigation they could devise. Crews walking the ground to collect and bury poisoned carcasses so scavengers would not find them, working to shrink the body count among the birds. It went better the second time, though it was never bloodless. And then the dogs went to work, the final phase, the one that turned an aerial bombardment into a genuine eradication. Specially trained detection dogs and their handlers walked the island block, hunting down the handful of rabbits the poison had missed. And the numbers here are almost hard to believe. The first year of the campaign eliminated somewhere around 150,000 rabbits. After the baiting, the dogs and hunters reportedly found just 8 surviving adult rabbits left on the entire island, plus a single litter of young, 8. Read that again, against a population that had once climbed well past 100,000. Those dogs and handlers covered more than 90,000 kilometers on foot, sweeping the island twice over, searching for any sign of life that should no longer be there. A single fresh dropping, a chewed stem, a footprint in the mud, anything that meant the job was not yet done. And then, the most important part, they waited. Because you cannot simply declare an island clean. You have to prove it by watching and finding nothing for years. No rat, no mouse, no rabbit, not one. And in 2014, after the required stretch of time had passed with no sign of any of them, Macquarie Island was officially declared pest-free, the largest and most complex multi-species eradication of its kind ever completed. Now, stack the numbers end to end and feel the scale of it. An island of around 12,800 hectares, 3 invasive species removed at once, roughly 250 tons of bait, a campaign of about $25 million, 150,000 rabbit in the first year, down to 8 survivors and a single litter. More than 90, 0 kilometers walked by dogs and their handlers. Cats put ashore in the 1820s, rabbits in 1878, and a clean island at last in 2014, nearly 2 centuries after the first ship unloaded the first passenger that should never have come ashore. And here is where the story turns from a horror into something close to hope, the payoff for the whole brutal gamble. In the years since, Macquarie Island has done something researchers describe as astounding. The tussock grasses and the strange, ancient megaherbs that the rabbits had grazed down to nothing have come surging back. The hillsides are greening over. Seabirds that had been pushed to the margins are returning to ground they had effectively lost. Even the native scavengers that took the worst of the poisoning, the giant petrels and the skuas, have been recovering toward their former numbers. Places that had been reduced to mud and exposed rock have softened back into the dense green carpet that once defined the island, the kind of transformation that can be tracked frame by frame in aerial photographs taken years apart. The island that scientists once feared was tipping into total collapse is, a decade on, held up as one of the great recovery stories in modern conservation. But watch how the consequences ripple outward, because this was never only about one island. At the center is Macquarie itself, a place pulled back from the edge. One ring out, it reshaped how Australia thinks about its own islands. Proof that even a tangled, multi-species invasion could be undone if you were willing to commit completely. One ring further, it became a template studied by conservationists around the world. A real-world lesson in how and how not to claw an ecosystem back from invaders, including the hard truth that pulling out one species without thinking through the whole web can do more harm than leaving it alone. And at the furthest edge sits the warning that gives the whole thing its weight, which is that the original wound was self-inflicted by good intentions. And the people who finally healed it had to gamble with poison precisely because an earlier, gentler fix had spiraled out of control. The deeper lesson is not that intervention is wrong. It is that an ecosystem is a web, and when you pull on one thread, you had better understand every thread it is tied to. Or you may find yourself, years later, loading poison into buckets to undo what kindness set in motion. And even now, the story is not sealed shut. The island is watched constantly, with strict measures meant to keep any new stowaway from ever gaining a foothold again, because everyone involved remembers how fast it all came apart the last time. Newer threats hang over it that have nothing to do with rabbits at all, things like a shifting climate and the global spread of a dangerous strain of bird flu, pressures that no helicopter and no detection dog can bait or hunt away. So the questions Macquarie leaves behind are not comfortable ones. What do you do when the thing wrecking a wilderness is your own earlier attempt to protect it? How far are you willing to go? How much are you willing to kill to undo a mistake made out of care? And if it took nearly 200 years to break this island and a violent, expensive, painful gamble to even begin healing it, what does that say about every other fragile place where we are still pulling threads we do not fully understand? Stand on Macquarie now, in the wind off the Southern Ocean, and the slopes are green again, the tussock is tall, the burrows are filling with birds that should be there, and the poisons is long gone from the soil. The penguins are still crowding the beaches. The grasses are still climbing back up the hills. And the watchers are still watching, because an island this hard won is never quite finished being saved. If stories like this one are what you come here for, follow along, and I will see you at the next one.